The strategic theater is intentionally misdirected towards kinetic signatures, the missile silo, the carrier group. This is a deliberate deception. The kinetic cost of symmetric conflict is prohibitive for economically fragile states. The real protocol is asymmetric. The target is not the adversary's military assets, it is their central nervous system. This vector is silence, the severing of undersea data cables, the blinding of orbital satellite networks. An attack that carries plausible deniability and induces a systemic solvency crisis before the first physical shot is fired. The objective is to create a blind Leviathan, a superpower with unmatched military force, rendered inert because its eyes, ears, and cognitive functions have been unplugged from the network. This is not theoretical. The logic was validated when, according to reports in the Jerusalem Post, Benjamin Netanyahu successfully urged the Trump administration to halt a kinetic strike on Iran. The fear was not of a symmetric response, but of unpredictable, asymmetric escalation. The same logic of systemic attack is visible in economic warfare, where trade disputes over assets like Greenland are used to test the fragility of Western alliances. The ultimate accelerant is internal. Reports of violent mobs claiming Minneapolis is their city are not isolated social events. They are textbook examples of weaponized social fragility, a pre-positioned liability. An adversary does not need to land troops in a nation engineered for internal collapse the moment communication is cut. The endgame is not occupation. It is systemic liquidation, turning the crisis into their opportunity. The motive is not ideology. It is insolvency. Every nation-state operates on a balance sheet of assets and liabilities. When the liabilities, social promises, debt service, domestic stability, exceed the capacity of the assets, the state enters a solvency crisis. It is mathematically bankrupt. A conventional kinetic war is the fastest way to accelerate this crisis. It is a zero-sum, high-cost expenditure with no immediate return on investment. According to CSIS analysis, an unpopular war becomes a catastrophic domestic liability, draining state resources while simultaneously eroding the political capital required to govern. This is the inflection point. Faced with systemic collapse, weakness forces a pivot. The strategic calculus shifts from symmetric engagement to asymmetric attack. The state cannot afford the kinetic cost of destroying an adversary's army, but it can afford to fund the vectors that target the adversary's internal vulnerabilities. The objective is to turn the adversary's complexity into a liability. Why engage a carrier strike group when you can trigger a crisis that paralyzes their internal political and economic systems? Reports show mobs roaming the streets, claiming cities as their own. This is not random chaos. It is the tactical output of a strategy born from economic desperation. The motive, therefore, is leverage. A fragile state, incapable of winning a fair fight, threatens to pull the entire system down. It engineers a crisis that forces the stronger power to halt its own actions, as seen in U.S.-Iran standoffs. This is launch-on warning for economies. The weak do not seek to win the game. They seek to flip the table. It is the only move left. The central calculation of modern conflict is no longer a matter of firepower. It is a solvency crisis. A legacy armored platform, a main battle tank, represents a kinetic cost of approximately $5 million. Its asymmetric counter, a first-person view drone, costs $500. This is not conjecture. Analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, have documented this radical cost inversion. This 10,000 to 1 cost disparity is the engine of what strategists call the democratization of violence. Lethal standoff capability is no longer the exclusive domain of nation-states. It has been decentralized, handed to fragile states and non-state actors who cannot afford to compete symmetrically. Instead, they weaponize this economic imbalance, transforming a stronger adversary's high-cost assets into indefensible liabilities. The objective is not to win a single battle, but to bankrupt the opponent's entire military-industrial protocol. The operational blueprint is no longer theoretical. The battle space is not a distant desert. It is the infrastructure that underpins your daily life. CSS reports confirm that conflicts are now staged in gray zones, politically stable but socially fractured regions used as proxy laboratories to test attack vectors against Western systems. Consider Minneapolis. Not as a protest, but as a tactical field test. According to reports, NGO-funded mobs practiced urban area denial, assaulting perceived political enemies and hunting officials. This wasn't chaos. It was a live-fire exercise in asset liquidation and psychological warfare, mirroring the Chaz experiment in Seattle. These are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a larger protocol, asymmetric escalation. When a state cannot afford the kinetic cost of a symmetric war, it shifts the battlefield. It weaponizes the adversary's internal divisions and economic complexity. This is the mathematical certainty of the weak against the strong. The logic is confirmed at the highest levels. When Benjamin Netanyahu advised the Trump administration to halt strikes on Iran, he wasn't signaling weakness. He was acknowledging the new reality. A symmetric kinetic strike invites a predictable response. The adversary, however, prefers to operate asymmetrically, a strategy that a conventional military response cannot contain. The primary vector is economic. While you watch street-level friction, the real war is on solvency. Trade wars, like the one reignited over Greenland, are not mere disputes. They are probes to identify systemic vulnerabilities. The ICAS analysis, turning crisis into opportunity, is the playbook. Identify a critical node like the chemical industry, apply pressure, and leverage the resulting systemic crisis. Proxy laboratories, whether in Minneapolis or as observed by RUSI analysts in regions like South Africa, serve to refine these tactics. The objective is to merge internal kinetic chaos with external economic pressure. This creates a solvency trap, a two-front war against a nation's fiscal stability and its social coherence. The endgame is not occupation. It is forced systemic collapse, the economic equivalent of a launch-on-warning nuclear strike. The doctrine is designated launch-on-warning. It is a systemic tripwire, a protocol of mutually assured destruction built for a world of clear signals. But in the current environment, it is a catastrophic liability. Analysts at CSIS have modeled the protocol's primary vulnerability, the fog of digital war. A low-cost asymmetric cyber attack does not need to destroy a single missile silo. It only needs to blind the early warning radar systems. By injecting phantom signals or inducing a total blackout, an adversary forces the commander into a zero-sum decision. The data is gone. Is the silence a malfunction, or is it the 5 minutes before impact? The protocol dictates that waiting for confirmation is not an option. The fear of decapitation forces a launch based on the absence of information. This is the endgame of asymmetric escalation, leveraging an adversary's own security protocol to trigger their self-destruction. The kinetic cost is near zero. The result is a planetary solvency crisis. The protocol for asymmetric escalation has already been initiated. While legacy media focuses on kinetic threats, intelligence from authorities like CSIS confirms the primary vector is economic. The West's systemic dependency on complex, just-in-time chemical supply chains, as detailed by ISIS, is not a strength. It is a single point of failure. This is the designated target. The delivery mechanism will not be a missile. It will be weaponized social fragmentation. The operational blueprint was tested in Minneapolis. NGO-funded mobs, escalating street violence, and the physical targeting of infrastructure and personnel. This creates a zone of plausible deniability, turning internal political division into a strategic asset for an external actor seeking to avoid symmetric retaliation, a doctrine observed by Rusi in states like Iran. Therefore, the calibration shot will occur within the next 12 months. Expect a coordinated, attribution impossible disruption of a Gulf Coast petrochemical port, likely Freeport or Houston. The event will be framed as an environmental protest that spirals into a multi-day blockade and critical equipment sabotage. The kinetic cost will be near zero. The economic impact, a multi-billion-dollar solvency test. This is not a prediction of a riot. It is the forecast of a supply chain decapitation strike masked as domestic unrest. It is the asymmetric launch-on warning, signaling the capacity to collapse the entire system without firing a single shot.